This is video 9 about life in the ocean and the different habitat zones. And we're going to start by listening to the song 200 Meters Down, written by a guy who teaches in the School of Education at NC State. And you've got 3 instructions. I want you to follow along with the lyrics as you listen. I want you to circle the vocabulary words you recognize, underline the words you're not sure about or don't know if you quite know the definition or never heard of, and then put an exclamation mark by the ones that you would like to learn more about. And some of those could be the ones that you underlined. So we'll pause here and do that. Now, the ocean is a huge community, and community is all the living things working together. So everything that's in, say, a food web in a zone. And it's impacted by the non-living things as well. And the physical factors that are non-living in the ocean include how much sunlight, what the temperature is, and how much water pressure there is. The habitat zones are called intertidal, neritic, and open ocean. And these are what life lives there is going to vary by these physical factors. The intertidal zone is just from the area between high and low tide. So the organisms that live there sometimes are exposed to direct sunlight because there is no water. It's low tide. So they burrow in the sand or they get washed back out. They have to be exposed to changing temperatures. They're underwater, they're not underwater. And there's very little water pressure, so they don't really have to be adapted to water pressure. The neritic zone begins at the end of where the lowest low tide is out in the ocean, and out to where basically there's the drop off at the continental slope. So in North Carolina, that's going to extend out from the low tide line to about 30 miles offshore. So there is some depth to the water there, but there's not great depth. This is not where you're going to have to worry about high pressure. The organisms are going to get plenty of sunlight for photosynthesis, and the temperature is going to remain pretty constant. You're not going to have the extreme temperature change here. Then the open ocean is out where you are above the abyssal plain. The drop-off has occurred. This is where the water is going to be very deep. The sunlight is going to vary dramatically from 200 meters down. It's going to start getting more like twilight, and then in the very deep zone it's going to be total darkness. The temperature is going to vary dramatically. It's going to be warmer in that surface zone of the open ocean, much cooler in the twilight zone, and then extremely cold in the deep zone. And the water pressure is going to increase as you go down the water column as well. So organisms are now going to be classified by where they live and how they move. Can they live in multiple zones? Do they just stay in one? And how do they move? Are they strong swimmers, or they have to kind of go with the flow and depend on the waves and the currents to really get them where they want to go? So plankton is a habitat zone of your microscopic algae, and then your macroscopic krill, which macro means I can see it with the eye, but it is still very small. So that would include your young jellyfish, your young crustaceans that are juveniles, and small fish, which we commonly call minnows. They're going to float and move with the waves and the currents. They are not going to be able to go against the flow. So as the tides come in, they're going to move. Phytoplankton make up the base of the majority of the ocean food chain, and that would include your algae and then your diatoms, and they're pictured in the lower right corner of the slide. And then zooplankton make up a lot of your first level consumers, and they would be your small jellyfish, your krill, your young crustaceans, and your minnows. Nekton is going to be your larger fish, your marine mammals, your sea snakes, reptiles, eels, and they move freely throughout the ocean. They can swim up and down the water column. They can come to the surface. They can dive into deeper waters. Then you have your animals that live on the seafloor, and some live on the seafloor in very shallow water. Some live on the seafloor in that intertidal zone. If you think about your little fiddler crabs and your little periwinkles, you might have commonly called them angel wings when the animal dies and the shell opens out. And they can burrow down in the sand, but they live on the seafloor in the intertidal zone. And then you have some that live out in the neritic zone, like your lobsters and your sea stars and your crabs, and then and your corals and your sea anemones and your sea urchins and your sponges, and then you have some species of these same organisms that live in deeper water, like your giant tube worms that live on the deep ocean floor. So they are going to stay on the bottom, and some are attached permanently, like your corals and your sea anemones and your sponges, and some, scurry around on the seafloor like your lobsters, your sea stars, and your crabs. And that's where we're going to finish. And now we're going to put all this together in a foldable.